Welcome to Shares from the American College of Financial Services, where money meets minds. Here's a look at what we'll be sharing with you today.
Every process we have in place is an opportunity to deliver an exceptional client experience and to really deepen the client relationship.
Hey there, I'm Alanah Phillips, a college FinServ Network ambassador and co-chair of its Next Gen Advisory Task Force. I'll be your host for this conversation today on representation in financial services, but we're actually going to dig into process building, the client onboarding experience, and we are joined today by Libby Greiwe. She is the host of the Efficient Advisor podcast, a speaker, advisor coach, and financial professional. Libby, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you. We have had a lot of really great conversations in our time knowing each other, Libby, and this one I know will be very useful to our audience. So to kick us off here, I know you talk about, Libby, your mission to create systems and processes so that advisors can work less. I think this is useful information for other financial professionals too. It's an overwhelming world, running a business, managing all the different pieces that we have. Can you give us a little bit of your origin story? How did we start and how did we get where we're at today?
Yeah, so I started my financial planning practice with a broker-dealer back in 2004. And I feel so old when I say that now because that was 2 decades ago. But I started my business in 2004 and I was kind of your typical financial advisor, right? Working around the clock like a crazy person, nights, weekends, whenever a client wanted to meet, I was there. I was your girl, Friday, 6 p.m., absolutely. And I was putting in tons and tons of hours and the business was going great. And then in 2008, I found out I was pregnant. And this was good news because we wanted a baby, but this was also really scary because for those previous 4 years, I had been running myself ragged and always on the verge of burnout. And I knew that there was absolutely no way that I could be the mom that I wanted to be and run a business like that. And really what I realized in that moment was that I didn't actually have a business. I just had a Libby, meaning I had to do everything. If I didn't show up, stuff didn't get processed. Even though I had support, it was still all dependent on me. And that was really when I had that aha moment that I have to step out of just being an advisor and really step into that CEO role inside of my practice and start taking that really seriously and building some systems and processes and streamlining the heck out of this thing so that I could ultimately get down to the 3-day a week, 24, 25-hour work week schedule that I wanted to, so I could still run a big business. And I really wasn't wanting to give up revenue and I didn't want to give up on all of the goals and dreams that I had for my practice, but I also really wanted to stay at home with my kids a little bit as well. So that was really kind of where the journey of how do I build out systems, how do I build out processes, how do I really maximize efficiency so that I can scale while working less. And ultimately that turned into doing a lot of speaking and kind of sharing. And then we started hosting workshops where advisors from all over the country with my broker-dealer would come in and my team and I would train them in our systems and processes, because it turns out there's a lot of advisors who want to make more money and actually work less hours.
Imagine that. Yeah. I think there's a few things in this story, Libby, that are important, and I want to pick a few of them out because I see a lot in our industry, especially when we have a advisor who is going to start a family, and that element comes into their business, that it is such a challenge at that point in time to figure out how do they continue to be business owner Libby and now mom Libby. How did the systems and processes, I guess, help with that? Is that something that you have found is a common trend in advisors that come to you, that they're also facing those challenges? I just want to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, well, and it was interesting because when I started, everybody around me, I always kind of joke, they were all fat, bald, and 50. And there weren't a lot of young female advisors and much less ones that had gone through the maternity, process while running their practice. So I really kind of fumbled around and had to figure it out on my own, which was not ideal. And after I had my second maternity leave, so my first one, I had my son in 2008, right when the market was crashing. So it was just an absolute disaster of a maternity leave. And then when I had my second son 2 years later, I was able to take off 4 months. And the difference between the first one and the second one was so staggering, and was able to continue to, do the production that I was hoping to do while taking this big leave. And I found lots of female advisors reaching out to me going, okay, what was the difference between the first one and the second one? And what do I need to do? What do I need to build in my business now if I'm thinking about starting a family, or, or gosh, I found out I'm pregnant, and at least we have a runway with pregnancy of a couple months.
Yeah, they do give you a little warning there.
A hot minute to figure out a few things that you need to get in place before you take some time off. So it is something that I have noticed we lack in this industry overall, is guidance and direction for advisors who are wanting to strike that balance between family and not give up on being able, you can do both. You can run a really big 7-figure firm on 3 days a week and be a really amazing mom or dad.
Yeah, I love it. And I know this is the opening to your podcast, right? Talking about the fact that you did that and you sold your business and all the other cool things that you do now because of that. But especially, I think, for women that I talk to in the industry, folks that are starting families, getting pregnant, whatever that is, those life events that I think can create a pause in a business, and often means a step back in terms of time or revenue. We don't want to step back in terms of income, though, because of starting a family. And I think it's so cool that you have the tools and sort of this roadmap to be able to share with folks that might find themselves in that position. And certainly for everyone else, right, that wants to work less, make more money, all the dream scenario that we all want. So how have you focused on helping advisors build those processes, those that want to elevate the client experience? I know we're going to talk a little bit about client onboarding. Maybe also tell us, why are advisors not doing this? Because it sounds like a magic bullet to solve all of our problems.
Well, I always like to share that there is nothing unique or special about me at all, right? I'm
okay. No, that's
wait. No, let me explain. Because sometimes you hear that, oh, you were running a 7-figure firm and blah blah blah. Like, I was in Cincinnati, Ohio. I worked for a broker dealer. I wasn't, East Coast or West Coast, or, oh gosh, everybody has a ton of money there, or some of the excuses that maybe we can in the Midwest, put on others, that you can literally do this. And I've helped so many advisors do it. So it's not a unicorn scenario. You can do it serving any type of demographic in any geographic location with any level of experience. And it's accessible for any advisor if they just kind of follow the 3 main things, which are really just building out simple systems and processes that are repeatable and scalable. It's building out a simple client service model that you can execute consistently with a high level of client experience. And it's getting the right team in place. So the right people in the right roles with the right culture. And those three things that are all really ultimately pretty simple are available to any advisor anywhere serving anyone.
I love it. And I think boiling things down to the simplicity of those 3 pieces is important. But obviously, Libby, it's easier said than done. So what is the secret sauce to helping advisors work on those 3 pieces?
Yeah. So the big question, right, is, well, if it's so easy, right, if it's not rocket science and it's super simple, why isn't everybody doing it? Well, the hardest part of being a financial advisor, especially when you've hit that place in your career. So for me, at that point when I found out I was pregnant, I was running a really successful practice. I had the revenue that I wanted, and I was in it, though. It was a tornado. It was all of the things that I had hoped and prayed for my practice were finally coming true. And then it was like, oh my gosh, all the things I hoped and prayed for were finally coming true. And I was so busy being in the tornado that it takes time and effort and energy and intentionality and planning for an advisor to step out of the tornado and actually carve out the time to work on the business. And really the hardest part for me was staring at a blank piece of paper. And so what we've done to kind of help expedite that process is really give a lot of chassis, templates, frameworks. My big goal, I used to hate it when I would go to a regional meeting or a conference, or I'd hear an amazing podcast and I'd hear all of these like life-altering, business-altering ideas. And then I'd sit down during that CEO time and say, okay, but like how? So we became very committed to the how and never having an advisor staring at a blank piece of paper. So how can we give you the template, the tool, the resource to help you so that you're not starting from scratch? You're really just taking something and modifying it for the business that you run and really making it your own.
Yeah, I think that's so extremely helpful. And there are so many folks in our industry that I think are executors that way. Once I have the tool, I can execute on it. But if you ask me to try to create it, then it's not going to happen. And you have so many of these resources available from your podcast through your website. I know I've seen and used several of them. What goes into, though, that first part you talked about, building out the simple system, those scalable and repeatable processes? What are the components of that for our listeners to break apart?
In my humble opinion, there are 7 processes that pretty much every single financial advisory practice has. And it's the first one's marketing and prospecting. The second one is your start to finish, your prospect to client financial planning process. The third one is onboarding. The fourth one's client experience. The fifth one is your ongoing client service model. The sixth one is your referral process. And then for those that manage assets, there's an investment process. So the big difference is all of these are happening in your practice. It's whether you're documenting it, delegating it, and being intentional about it is a totally different scenario. And so for me, it's taking a look at those 7 processes and recognizing that a process isn't just paperwork. It's not just moving the money from Fidelity to Schwab. Every process we have in place is an opportunity to deliver an exceptional client experience and to really deepen the client relationship. So one of the main questions that I get anytime I speak somewhere is, okay, you mentioned like on your podcast intro or in your keynote that you were a 100% referral only planning practice. And, okay, what do I need to do to get there? And again, it's not rocket science. The absolute best way, the best form of marketing is doing a really, really good job consistently. And you have to have systems in place. You have to automate. You have to delegate. You have to delete things that aren't impactful, and you have to streamline everything else.
Thank you for that, Libby. We're going to take a real quick break.
The American College of Financial Services, championing causes, connecting communities, delivering best-in-class applied financial knowledge and education
for the benefit of professionals like you and for the benefit of society.
Expand your opportunities at the all-new theamericancollege.edu.
And let's get back to our conversation with Libby. It sounds so simple, Libby, that we can build these processes and follow them. And I think that's where your third part of that comes in, with having the right people in place that are going to be able to do all of these things. So 7 processes. This is the framework, it sounds like, for a team to start with. If we don't have these 7 processes outlined, repeatable, scalable, documented somewhere within our CRM system, that these steps are happening, somebody's responsible for each part of it, it seems like that's perhaps a good place for a team to start.
Yeah, you can absolutely start with just documenting what you're doing now and then using that as a starting off place. So getting it at least on paper. So that was one of the biggest problems for me, is that everything lived in my head and in my assistant's head, and none of it was actually down on paper. And God forbid you go out on maternity leave, or, you get sick, or you have turnover inside of your practice, you have to kind of start all of that over. And when everything lives in your head, you end up skipping steps. You end up not having time for something. It's not automated. So you're just like, well, I mean, that follow-up email is not really important, when all of those little pieces that you've spent the time building are so important to the overall experience. So it's getting it down. And kind of, I picture this almost like in two columns, right? Here's what we're currently doing in that far left column. And here's what would make that experience exceptional. And that's when we add what I call the 3 layers of every process. So here's how we can make this process exceptional. And then how do we incrementally move towards that? So the first step is just getting it down. The second step is understanding where you want it to be ultimately. And then really the third step is, again, kind of stepping out of that advisor role and into that CEO role, because process change is hard. And how do we then incrementally move towards that ideal process?
I think that's really helpful, Libby, and especially for our folks that have to put on this CEO hat and look at where you're at today and then where you want to be. Now, you mentioned when you were talking through these 7 processes that an underlying current there is that every single one of these is about the client experience. And I don't know that we always think about that way. So can you dig a little deeper into that? How, and maybe with an example of some sort, do we create those processes with the client experience really as the overarching end in mind factor that we're working off of?
I think one of the best examples of all of those 7 processes is onboarding. So as an advisor, when we think of onboarding, we really think of it as, okay, how do we get the money from A to B? How do we take the application? How do we get them approved? And if we're focusing just on the paperwork piece of it, we're totally missing the boat. We're missing the opportunity to use something as what seems as silly as onboarding as just a platform for us to really dive into the client experience. So when we're looking at something like onboarding or any other process, there's really 3 layers. And yep, the first layer is the paperwork. It's the nuts and bolts. It's the actual transfer paperwork. It's the application. It's the getting the client set up in the portal. It's all of the like nuts and boltsy kind of stuff. And then there's the second layer, which is expectations. And this is always setting expectations for your team and setting expectations for your clients. The human brain is wired to want to know what to expect next. And if we're going to make this experience exceptional, we need to come in and set these expectations. Then the third layer is really, kind of what I call the remarkable part. And this is where we can use a process as simple as onboarding to really deepen the human-to-human connection that we have with our clients. And that when we get all 3 of those layers in place, that's really when the whole referable experience comes into play. So I can give you some examples if that's helpful.
I was going to say, yeah, can we get some examples in each of these 3 categories? I mean, like the paperwork one, I think everybody understands, right? There's a process there probably outlined by your firm or whatever company that you're working with of like, these are the forms that we need. Here's where it needs to get input. Here's the person who's going to follow it through that process and make sure money ends up from one account to another, right? So maybe that one's
pretty simple. So we think about something as simple as onboarding, right? And it's paperwork. But really, there is a lot of data around the first 100 days of a client's experience with an advisor and how it's disproportionately related to the longevity of the client relationship. So I'll make that easy, right? Like if you really crush it in the first 100 days, your clients will last a lot longer. And the result that we see too is if we're really intentional about this first 100-day window, you actually receive way more referrals from these clients way faster than you would having to, get into like years and years of proving value and, and building trust and rapport with clients. When advisors recreate or reimagine their onboarding using all 3 layers, we see more referrals in that first 100 days when you haven't proven a darn thing and you actually haven't, really made good on all of the promises that you've even made so far. And so, so let's dive in. So one of the things with onboarding is for me, and there's a whole podcast episode on it about how do we set expectations with our clients. So I love to think of onboarding. If you have this financial planning process where you meet a prospect and you do a discovery and you do goals and then you gather data and you do analysis and you make recommendations, you're seeing them all the time. And I think of that first planning process sort of like dating. And you're still kind of trying to impress them and woo them, and you're seeing them all the time and putting in all of this effort. And if a client says yes and says, yep, I want to be in a committed relationship with you, right? I want to work with you as a planner. And we let them just kind of fall into maybe our ongoing client service model, which might not be seeing them again for a year. There's almost this sensation of like, wow, when we were dating, everything was amazing. And they were doing all these things and treating me really well. And now that we're married, like, wah, 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 we get to hang out on our anniversary. That's the next date we get. And so we don't want our clients to feel like they're falling off of this cliff. So we want to create almost like a letdown period where we can ease them into the ongoing service model, even if your cadence is just once a year. And how do we slowly let them down into that and create those expectations around it so that it feels right to them and it doesn't feel like this big wah, 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 like this big letdown of, oh my gosh, they were so amazing. And once they got our money, then we never heard from him ever again, kind of a thing. So in that expectations area, one of the things that we like to do is a formal onboarding meeting. And so this actually checks a lot of boxes. This is really kind of each piece of this that I'm going to share as examples is really kind of all three. So we do a formal onboarding experience with our clients. And this is actually where I stepped out of the process and my director of operations stepped in. Now, she had been part of the whole planning process. Our clients have already built know, like, and trust rapport with her. And so I would step out and we were very clear that my role was to oversee the overall strategy inside of their financial plan and their investment portfolio. And that Lori would do everything else, right? And so we had been setting that expectation all along. So again, they didn't feel like, well, what happened to her? Now we're working with this other person. And wow, they're going to be our point of contact from this point forward until our next meeting. We set that expectation with them throughout the planning process. And then we had these formal onboarding. So in this formal onboarding, we did all of the nuts and bolts. We tried to be proactive, thinking about what are all of the potential areas of friction or frustration that could happen for this client. We would sit them down and we went through this big, huge list of, instead of asking the client to go back and get their online account set up, we would sit there and do it with them. And then Lori would show them how to navigate it, how to find their tax documents, how to find their statements, how to see stuff, how to create nicknames for their different portfolios. She would go through getting them set up. Instead of just saying, hey, follow us on social media, she would actually like, hey, give me your phone. Let's set you up. Let's click the things. Let's do all of this stuff. Let's make sure you've got third-party contacts, that we've got the right banking on file, that we've got all of these things, established for you. And during this window where we're moving the money and we're underwriting and doing the things, we were sending a weekly connection to them. So a weekly email, that's this concierge level service that we're wanting to provide of, hey, every week we want you to know, here's where we're at with all of the business that's processing. Here's what we're waiting on. Here's who we're waiting on that from. And here's what we're doing about it. And if there's any action that we needed from the client. So again, people want to know what to expect. We never want them to be like, hey, we filled out all that paperwork. I took that life insurance physical. Like, is that like, what's even going on with that? Or geez, we're moving $1 million out of my old 401k to this person. Is there something that I need to be what happens next? So how can we intentionally stay with those clients and let them know, where we're at? So how do we take care of all the little friction points? We want to be conscious of how our clients are feeling during this process. So even though they've said yes to us, there's still trepidation, or there's still, did we make the right choice, right? Kind of like that engagement of, okay, all right, this is what I want to do long term, right? But they're still wanting to make sure that we're going to make good on all of the promises that we've made to them. So how can we level up that service during that window and play into that feeling of, okay, did we make the right choice? What are some of these friction points that might potentially cause frustration or pain? And of course, we're all going to get NIGOs. We're all going to have processing issues, but it's how are we effectively handling it, setting expectations, maybe even setting expectations that there might be these NIGOs and that it is a frustrating process and that it is really, really messy until everything arrives, and then we'll make sure it's all cleaned up. And so going through in our formal onboarding process, making sure any point of potential friction for our clients, we never wanted them to be sitting there going, okay, like where do I find my such and such? Or how do I look up the so-and-so, right? We wanted to address that ahead of time. And so that kind of touches on the paperwork piece, that kind of touches on the expectations piece. And that's more face time with them, more human to human connection, and making sure that they feel really good about the way that they're working with us and that they know exactly what's coming down the pike. So we had a full expectations of our engagement that we would go through with them, really detailing out everything from how are we going to communicate? What are our office hours? What's the best way to contact us? What are ways that not contacting us isn't helpful? Who does what inside of our office, and they can expect to talk to whom for what things, and really kind of laying out all of the things that we wouldn't want to become a friction point later. And we never wanted to say no to our clients. So how could we create a space that allowed us to always say yes and have the right expectations on our end of what we expected from our clients, but also for our clients and what to expect on our end. A couple other examples during that window are, after a client's first investment statement came out, we would hold an investment statement meeting. And by we, I mean somebody else on my team would call them and say, hey, you got your first statement. I just want to walk you through it. There's lots of, pluses and minuses and things as we've, money came in and we made sub-account transfers or we've moved money around. Like, we just want to walk you through and make sure that you understand how to read your statement. And our client, and again, it's part of that letdown period where we're still wanting to talk to them. We're still wanting to communicate with them. So their first investment statement might not come for 3 months. And so again, it's within that first 100-day window where we're keeping contact, and we never want a client to open up their statement and be stressed out about it. Be like, I don't know what this means. I can't find anything. It doesn't look right. How can we proactively address any potential points of tension or frustration for clients? And by being proactive and easing that, then they're not having that frustration. They're not having, they know that this appointment's coming up and they'll be able to walk through that statement with us. Same thing, we do an insurance contract review where after an insurance contract was issued, we'd go through that page 3 with them and make sure they understood what riders they accepted, what riders they declined. Here's how this works. Here's any limitations, and just making sure they felt really, really comfortable with everything that they implemented with us. And then the last thing that we can talk about in this short window here today is this idea of making sure that we're doing something to surprise and delight our clients within that first 100-day windows. And often when we think surprise and delight, we think things like presents and gifts, and absolutely, those are great things to do. And you should have a client intel process that you're implementing where you're gathering this kind of data and information about your clients. But just an easy example that doesn't cost a thing and only takes a few minutes is as you're working with, let's say it's a couple, finding out their wedding anniversary and what their favorite fancy restaurant in town is. And then 6 months prior to that anniversary, calling and just making a reservation for them. And then 3 months before their anniversary, calling your client and saying, hey, we know you guys really love Boca. We went ahead and made a reservation for you on your anniversary at 7 p.m. If you're anything like us, we kind of wait until the last minute when it comes to anniversaries, and then all the good reservations are gone. So we just wanted to do that on your behalf. You can keep it, you can get rid of it, doesn't matter. It's completely up to you. It's just something we wanted to do on your behalf. And then of course, for single clients, we would do that for their birthday and like, hey, we made a reservation for you and 3 of your gal pals. You can keep it, you can get rid of it. We just wanted to do that for you because we know we want to celebrate milestones, and we often tend to not do that for ourselves. And it's just something we like to do for our clients. So doesn't cost a dime, only takes a minute to get on Open Table and make a reservation. And clients are so moved and touched by that. And most of the time they're like, oh, thank God, because we actually didn't plan anything for our, oh, I have an anniversary coming. Yeah. And that's the stuff that builds that human to human connection. Not only did we do that for you, but we paid attention to what's important to you, what you like, where you like to go, when your anniversary is. And when you build a process around all of that and you can do that level of experience consistently, that's where the referrals start to pour in. That's where that high Wow, this is a really different experience than we've had with any other financial advisor in the past. That's when those things come together. And it doesn't take a big budget or a big team or all kinds of fancy software to do that.
No, I love that. That was an incredible onboarding experience when I listened to each of those pieces of that, Libby, and think about it in the shoes of a client. So a few questions from the things that you described. So that meeting, you have this onboarding expectations meeting. It's formal, it's official. Are you meeting with them in person? Is this virtual? And how did you come up with those agenda items for that meeting?
It can be done in person. It can be done virtually. And the agenda items were really just a compilation of mistakes that I made along the way or problems that we ran into. So, a client calls in and says, hey, did we pay Jim's life insurance? And you're like, oh, we don't have the right authorization on file to share with you if you paid that premium. How annoying is that? What do we need to think about ahead of time to make sure that we never have to say no to a client again? So usually anytime I built a process, it was to avoid looking like an idiot later. It came from some mistake that we made or an error that we ran into or some sort of thing with a client, calling in and needing money wired to their account. Turns out we don't have the right banking on file. So how do we proactively think through those things that could potentially be issues in making sure that we're working together really smoothly long term?
Yeah, I love using those mistakes as the basis for some of the items on an agenda and a process. It seems like, Libby, that meeting would take a long time. How long is the onboarding meeting?
60 minutes.
Okay. All right.
Never ever very rarely did we, I shouldn't say never ever, but very rarely did we go over 6 minutes. So as an advisor with ADD, I powered down at about 55 minutes in, I'd be like, so all of our meetings were an hour or less. We wanted to make it efficient for our clients. And I mean, that's a lot of stuff to go through, but it was really, we had it down to a science, and it was just a matter of having a really solid agenda, having the right expectations of here's what you can expect from this meeting. Here's what we're going to go through. Please bring your computer, your phone, here's what we need from you. Here's what we're going to bring to the table. And then just going boom, 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 and getting through all the stuff.
Yeah. It sounds like a great execution meeting that way. And all the things that I hear advisors and other professionals talk about, I had to step away from dinner tonight because my client couldn't get into their account, and I had to call and get on the computer with them and set that up. If we've done that ahead of time, even though that took time to build that process out, to host that meeting, to make sure that all of those pieces were checked on your checklist, it's saving us a ton of time reacting to things on the back end. Is that what your process building is going to do for us overall?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, always investing on the front end, pays dividends time-wise in the back end. But even more importantly than saving time, it's avoiding a potential opportunity for a client to be like, ugh, working with them is hard or frustrating, or I can't believe we don't have this something set up.
No, I think that's certainly exceptional. Love the reservation idea. I think anyone who's listening should implement that immediately. I'll ask you this, Libby, because there's lots of really good things in there. We document the process. We're avoiding reactionary things later. We're building this based on mistakes that we've made. I think there's so many good pieces there for someone to take and implement. Can we talk briefly about what tools maybe you're using to help automate any of these items and make that easier for you and your team?
One of the big misses for most advisors, including myself, was having all of this tech and not really knowing how to maximize it and really kind of using it at the bare minimum. What's the minimum viable product for me to function, get a client into my CRM, find the information that I need, and not really take advantage of the huge amount of automations and workflows and tools that these things have. And they continue to add all the time as AI has just kind of, infiltrated the client experience world or in the CRM, and really actually spending time to be a student of whatever tech that you currently have. There's so much time wasted tech stack jumping, looking for this one will do this and when this one will do that, when honestly what you have is probably actually sufficient and has some of those tools and resources. You just haven't been using it. So actually carving out time in your calendar or in your model week to be a student, or having someone on your team be a student of the tech that you already have in place, and consistently looking. So as CEO of your business, having that time set aside every year to review processes and to see, is there something new that we can automate that we weren't able to automate before? Is there something, a new workflow opportunity that didn't exist the last time we reviewed this? So that's why it's important to have time built into your calendar to review your processes to see if there's, every single year we want to be looking at how can we make it better, faster, smarter, cheaper, or easier.
Yeah, we can't just set it and forget it. And I think this is where, there's so many resources. Anyone who's affiliated with a broker, dealer, RIA, et cetera, within your firm, somebody who is an expert in your CRM system, you can sit down with the red tail or the wealth box person and figure out what has been added, what's been updated, where are you missing utilizing some of the tools that they already have. And that just takes some intention, obviously, but they exist. The folks who are the experts and know how to utilize best that tech that you have. So, Libby, as we wrap up this discussion, I think so much incredible information for our folks. You've talked a little bit about the results of this, right? That in these first 100 days, if we do this amazing onboarding experience, we were intentional about it, that we're going to show our clients our value, which I think is a hard thing for financial professionals to demonstrate outside of performance results and investments or whatever. And we're differentiating ourselves, which is helpful in terms of our referability and making them feel great about their decision to work with us. Are there any other results that you experienced or have watched advisors experience because of implementing a process like this?
Well, if I just speak from my own experience, I went from working 80 hours a week to 24, and while still scaling my practice to a 7-figure solo advisor firm. So, reduced time is one of the biggest benefits, but for me, it was being able to, lay my head down on my pillow at night and not worry that something was going to fall through the cracks or that the ball was going to get dropped, because we had those processes in place, because we had those systems, and that I knew we were going to be delivering an exceptional client experience consistently each and every time because we were using the processes. So really, increased referrals is great. Yes, reducing the amount of time spent on stuff is also great. But for me, it was stepping out of overwhelm and being able to actually build a practice that I loved and that served the lifestyle that I was hoping to have.
I love that. I think there's so much of the reduction of anxiety, reduction of time spent on things that's extremely valuable for our financial professional listeners. So, Libby, we appreciate you giving us the secrets here to what has worked in your business and how you've helped other advisors do this. If our listeners want to find more of your secret roadmap to success here, where can they do so?
Well, it's really not so secret. I lay it out every single week in my podcast, The Efficient Advisor. And I typically hang out on LinkedIn, and we have a Facebook community called the Efficient Advisor Community, where we've got about 2,000 advisors and operational folks in advisory practices, just sharing tools, resources, ideas, and I hang out there as well.
Well, we're so grateful for you being able to share this knowledge with us, and hope that our listeners will check you out and get to build a practice that they love with an amazing client onboarding experience and efficiencies that reduce anxiety. So thank you, Libby, for sharing all that with us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
That's all for now, but you can find all our episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most other streaming services. Be sure to like us, follow us, and leave us a rating and review. Shares is a production of the American College of Financial Services, and we hope you join us next time as we share ideas that expand your opportunities.